So, hi everybody. So, this is the second panel on Saturday afternoon. So, this is the hashtag Dundee and Angus Crime with the Dangerous Dames, which is Wendy H Jones, Jackie McLean, and Chris Longmuir, and it's chaired by Ian Skewis. So, I'm just going to leave you.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. So, this is the Reading Between the Crime online book festival, and this is all been organised by Lindsay Adams. So thank you, Lindsay, for inviting us here today. So we are calling this Dangerous Dames. So we have three femme fatales here with us today. So we have Wendy H Jones, Jackie McLean, and Chris Longmuir. And my name is Ian Skewis, and I'm an author and an editor. And what we're going to do first of all, so we're representing kind of the Dundee and Angus region today. I always think that Dundee and Angus sounds a bit like a crime duo, doesn't it? You know, a pair of detectives. Yes, you know. So what we'll do first of all is I'll get you just to introduce yourselves to our readers and viewers. Just tell them a little bit about how you got to where you are now. And should we start with Chris? Would that be okay?
Oh dear.
Somebody's got to start.
I know. Oh, well, I'm Chris, as you know, and I write mostly crime fiction. I write two different types. I write contemporary and I write historical. I kind of flip between each one. So I'm doing a contemporary at the moment, but the past two have both been historicals. I've got the Dundee Crime series, which is contemporary, and I've got the Kirsty Campbell series, which is historical, and I've just started a new suffragette series, of which the first book was published this year, on the week of lockdown. So that was good timing. So that book, I mean, I've actually been doing doorstop sales, but believe it or not, people come to the door to get books. Never done that before. So I'd call that my over the garden wall books. So if you want a book, come and get one over the garden wall. So that's me. I've been writing a long time. Started out doing short stories and articles, mostly articles, and was quite well published with them. But I got the urge to do novels about 11 years ago, and that was the start of them. But it was my fourth novel before I was published. So that's me.
Fantastic. It's really good to have, you know, we've got a real good mix of authors here today. So we'll move on to Jackie. Would you like to go next?
Jackie, you're muted.
You're on mute.
On mute, that's it.
That's because I pressed the mute button. Yeah, I'm Jackie McLean and I'm really good with technology. I write the D.I. Donna Davenport series, and at the moment,
You're muted.
I know it's sorted. I've just been told aside there I'm muted as well. I'm not anymore. Yeah, I've written the D.I. Donna Davenport trilogy, and that's set in and around Arbroath and Dundee and elsewhere, and maybe get a chance to talk about some of the other places later on. But Donna's a bit of a larger than life character. And yet the first book in the series was Toxic, followed by Shadows, and followed by Run, which was published last year. I'm currently working on a new series at the moment as well. So that's me for now.
Great, fantastic. Yes, sorry, I just remembered that I actually have your books here. Just, you know, product placement. So that was Jackie's. This is Chrissy's as well, one of hers. And next we have Wendy Jones. Yes.
Well, it's Wendy H Jones, just in case anybody's looking for my book. The reason for that is it's not me being precious about my middle initial. I don't care. But if you look me up on Amazon, you might get a shock if you miss the H out, because the author without the H has written The Sex Lives of English Women, and that's not only to me. But I think I'm advertising her book for her, so I think it's selling like hotcakes. Anyway, I'm Wendy H Jones, and I'm from Dundee. And to be honest, I turned to writing after my previous career as a serial killer was getting a bit boring. So I thought I'd actually, you know, turn my hand to writing. No, that was a joke. No real people were harmed in the creating of my books. I promise, it's all fiction. So no, I started off writing as academic writing. I was in academia, I was teaching nursing training, then I was teaching teacher training, and I did that. I was writing academic articles and textbooks. What?
Oh no!
Slight technical hitch here. Don't worry.
Wendy.
What we'll do is we'll
actually started writing. That was how I started writing. Sorry, I'm coming and I'm going here. Everybody's coming and going. I don't know whether I'm coming or going. So I then moved to writing fiction because I was very ill. I had problems with my lungs, and I could down problems. So one thing you can do while you're is read. So I was writing books, and that was how I got started.
Okay, right. Wendy's been having a few technical issues this morning, ladies and gentlemen.
I don't know whether people can hear me or not.
Yeah.
I write the Cass Claymore Investigate series. I write the Detective Inspector Shona Mackenzie mysteries, the Ferguson Flora mysteries, and then just as an aside, in case you don't have enough to do, I write young adult children's picture books, the Bertie the Buffalo series, and non-fiction books for writers. So I literally can cover you from the cradle to the grave. So all your reading needs, from the cradle to the grave, I'm your woman. And I'm also the president of the Scottish Association of Writers, which I'm very proud of. I love that organisation, and it's an absolute honour to be the president.
Yes, thank you so much. So
I'm sorry if I keep coming and going, but I'm not entirely sure what's happening with the internet. Dundee's having an issue.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. I mean, these things are, because they're live, that there's always going to be the possibility of a technical hitch. But I think we got the gist of it. We got most of the information from you, which is great. And it's great to have such an eclectic group of authors here today. So what I'll do is, Lindsay has set some questions. But what I'm also going to do, just to add the danger element, is I'm going to throw in a few that you are not prepared about. So I've got some additional questions as well, which I'll just throw in, every now and then, just to kind of danger it up a little bit. So the first question is really, really straightforward. How did you get started writing? So I think for the purposes of this being live and people can't really talk over each other, presumably with this kind of technology, so I'll probably just need to do it one at a time, unfortunately. So while Wendy's okay with her internet, should we ask Wendy first? Would that be okay? I think the screen's frozen. I tell you what, we'll ask Jackie. Is that okay?
Right, sure, yep. How I got into writing, I think it's like a lot of writers, it's just always been a hobby. So from writing War and Peace as our letters to Santa, from writing wee stories all the way through, I've always written, and I guess it was a choice between writing and being locked up by going mad by not getting the writing out. No, I've always written, and by the time I was 14, I had written a couple of full-length novels, wrote plays, screenplays and stuff like that. But as far as crime writing goes, that's been more of a deliberate move on my part. So several years back, I did a count, and I had 22 partly written novels stashed away. So I would start writing a novel, get a new idea, get fed up with the one I was writing on, put that away, start the new one, and that kept on going. So I had 22 of those sitting down. And eventually my partner said to me, look, just pick one and finish it. So that became toxic. And when that was finished, I then thought, right, okay, let's try and do something with this. And I realised it didn't actually fit in with any kind of particular market. And I thought the closest it is to crime fiction. So I redrafted it to become a crime fiction book. So that was much more of a deliberate move to write crime fiction in particular. But writing in general has just always been a hobby.
So you wrote your first novel aged 14.
I'd written 2 of them by that time, yeah.
Wow, that is amazing. That is amazing. And you've now completed a trilogy, haven't you, as well?
That's right, yeah. That's right.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, good. Right, Wendy, What about you? Oh, you might not have heard that question. I don't know. Oh, I think the screen's frozen again by the look of it. Right. Okay. Sorry. Right, Chris, could you answer the question? So it was, how did you get started writing?
Well, I think I've been writing most of my life. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to go out making up stories in my head, but never thought I could write them down. I did submit a short story to the Sunday Post, which was taking short stories at that time, way back when I was in my 20s, and I got what I now know was a rave review, or a rave rejection. And if I had done anything with it, they would have probably taken it, but I did nothing with it because it was a rejection, you know. So I carried on, started to get published with short stories and articles about 20 odd years ago. Did quite well with the articles, but only started writing novels about 11 years ago. I think it was my fourth novel that was published. I wrote my first one. It was a saga which I wrote the year the sagas went out of fashion, which was why I turned to a life of crime. Anyway, I wrote my historical crime. That went round the editors and publishers with loads and loads of rejections. So I thought, well, this is not working. So I thought, I'll do a contemporary crime. So I wrote a contemporary crime. That went did the rounds as well, still the same thing. Then I wrote a second contemporary crime, and that did the rounds as well. And it was doing the rounds for about 2 years. And I got plenty of rejections. Some of them were rave rejections, but didn't get any further. Chasing agents and publishers, nothing happening. So I submitted my Deadwood, it was. I called it the Screaming Woods at that time. And I submitted it at the SAW competition for the Pitlochry. It won. I had also put it in for the Dundee International Book Prize, and it won. Now, that's what got me my publishing deal, because winning the Dundee International Book Prize came with a beautiful cash prize, which I went on the Orient Express with and bought a Mac computer. But it also brought a publishing deal. So that was my breakthrough book into publishing. So that was okay. Now, I suppose you've all heard of Stodd's Law, have you? It's pursued me all my life. Anyway, that book, it was published. It was out for a year. I was able to submit a second book the following year, put it in. Do you know what happened that year? Publishing went into a nosedive. All the publishers weren't taking submissions. So it went to the readers, and the reader liked it, but they wrote back and said, well, you know, we do like it, but we're not publishing any books for the next 2 years. So I again tried to find agents and things, and it was an agent who said to me, look, he says, I've been publishing online to Kindle. Why don't you try that? He says, if you try it, he says, I can always help you. So that's okay. So I put my Night Watcher up. That was my first book in the Dundee Crime series, up to Kindle, and did my own cover, which was rubbish, because I didn't know how it would do. I thought it might just go up there and nobody will buy it, you know, so I couldn't afford to spend for a cover, but it did very well. So I commissioned a cover, went on. I couldn't put Deadwood up, because it was still with Polygon. But I did Missing Believed Dead, the third book in the Dundee Crime series. And then I went back to my historical roots with the first book, The Death Game. Now, The Death Game, although it wasn't published at the time and got loads of brave rejections, had actually won a competition run by a new publishing company, which I will not name because the experience was not pleasant. And it was one of the 20 unpublished crime novels in the world, which were chosen to be the winners. And I was one of them. I was under a year's contract to them, which I broke at the end of the year because it wasn't a pleasant experience. But that was The Death Game. But they'd made me do so many edits to it, I'd ruined the book. So I rewrote it and published it. And that was The Death Game. So that's me. And after that, of course, went on to my other books. And, you know, it's just been a roll since then. It's up and down.
It's brilliant. What I love about interviewing authors is that you all come from such different backgrounds, and everybody's got their own particular way of getting into publishing as well. And I always find it endlessly fascinating, actually, you know, how people do it as well. So, Wendy, I don't know if you could hear the question or not from earlier.
I heard it.
Yeah, so what about yourself?
I've come to the conclusion that somebody from Sky is actually listening to this and they think I'm frightfully boring. So every time I talk, they switch my internet off.
You're not boring.
This is what seems to happen. Probably with the person from Sky. I'll bore you to death, Sky, and they'll switch me off again. Yeah, as I said earlier, I was ill, so I started writing, and crime was the best thing for me because it's what I read. I've been reading crime. I was an early reader, a really early reader. And by the time I was 10, I'd read my way through all the famous 5, Secret 7, Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, any other childhood detective that you can actually think of. And by the age of 10, I went on to Agatha Christie and all the other crime novels. So crime was the first thing to do. Now, I pitched my first book to several publishers, and it didn't pan out. One was interested but said it'll be 2 or 3 years before we can publish it. And I'm from Dundee. We're not known for our patience in Dundee, to be honest. We get a bit bored, you know. So I thought, oh well, look, I'm going to do this professionally. I'll get professionally edited. I'll get a professional cover designer, and I will put it out. Now, I did have some help from a certain author called Chris Longmuir, who already knew a lot about self-publishing by this point. So thank you, Chris, for all your help. It helped me with self-publishing. And I thought, well, I'll bring the first book out. If it doesn't pan out, I've wasted some money. But it took about 2 years before it came out because I was doing things with it. Well, by that time, the next 2 in the series, well, it turned out that book 1 sold like hotcakes. It was really, really popular. And everybody was going, when's the next one? When's the next one? And I thought, well, I've written another 2. I might as well carry on. So before I knew it, there was 3 books out, and they were all doing it separately. Now 7 books.
Okay, we're having more technical difficulties. That person from Sky really doesn't like you.
I would hate to be the person from Sky because she will kill them.
That's a shame. Right, okay, what I'll do is I'll move on to the next question, unless... No, I thought that was maybe Wendy getting back through there. Sorry, Wendy. Sorry about that. Okay, what I'll do is I'll danger it up at this point, like we don't have danger with the technology. You all write a series of books, or in some case, you know, more than one series of books featuring the same character. How has that central character progressed? How have they grown and evolved over the books, and if so, how? So I will ask this time Jackie first, please.
Okay, so the central character in my series is Donna Davenport. She's the lead detective, and she's had a series of crises in her own personal life at the beginning of the series, and she works her way through those and is learning how to settle down her personal life, and is learning how to, you know, properly commit and just properly be grateful for her life. But she has her arch enemy across the series as well, and she's a bit obsessed with that. But she learns to use some of the prejudice against herself. So she lives with a mental illness, and she uses prejudice about that from other people to play on that, and uses that to trick people in the course of her bringing about justice and bringing down her nemesis. So she learns about herself, she learns about how people perceive her, and she learns to use that to her own advantage. She learns to turn that around on other people. So I would say that's probably how she develops the most throughout the series, is learning basically how to not use people or manipulate people, but to understand people, and to give them some insight and reflect back to themselves. You know, she makes people realise, I jumped to that conclusion because I thought this about you. So she makes people do that.
Yeah, so there's almost an element of perhaps psychology, you know, which I think kind of goes with the detective territory, doesn't it? I think as well.
Yeah, I think it's part of the fascination of crime fiction is what makes somebody commit the crime, but what goes through your mind when you're trying to solve a crime as well.
Yeah. Okay, Chris, what about you? How have your characters matured or evolved over time?
Well, I suppose the best one to talk about is Kirsty Campbell, because the Dundee Crime series, Bill Murphy was never meant to be the main character, although some people think he is. It was mainly just a crime series, but you can't change you can't change the police characters with each book because they're all based in Dundee. So that was just by the way. He has developed a wee bit, but not that much. But Kirsty Campbell, I mean, she is a different kettle of fish altogether. The stories are about her. She is an ex-suffragette policewoman in 1919 in the Kirsty Campbell series. Actually, I've got one in 1917 at Gretna, which is not Dundee, during the First World War with Kirsty in it. That's part of the Kirsty Campbell series. But the other two are set in Dundee. And it's 1919 she comes to Dundee, seconded from the Metropolitan, well, it's not the Metropolitan Police, but it's the Women's Police Service in London, which is not employed by the Metropolitan Police, but is kind of works with them. Because the early police women's services were all voluntary services. They weren't actually official police services, but they were linked with the police. And in many ways, you know, in police history, they don't actually recognise these early women's police forces, which I find fascinating. So Kirsty is seconded there. She's asked by the police superintendent in Dundee to come up and be a policewoman in Dundee on an experimental basis. And she arrives in 1919, which is quite prickly. And she has a past history of her own. I mean, when she was younger, she has a very bad sexual experience, which kind of makes anti-men. So she doesn't trust men, she doesn't like men, and she's teamed up with a detective inspector, male detective inspector in Dundee, which over the kind of course of the book, she gradually comes to trust and to actually like. Although he's married, so there's not going to be a kind of romantic element, although there is a frisson of something there. But there's no way Kirsty's going to get involved, get married to a man. I mean, there's no way in this world. So she is developing, and she is starting to come to terms a bit with her past life. She is, when she comes to Dundee, she's estranged from her family, and she gradually starts to accept, you know, that her family are part of her life again, and she's accepted back with her family. So there's all this kind of past history kind of getting in the way of the police investigations. So yes, she is maturing, and she will mature more as time goes on. But Kirsty is such a fascinating person, and her backstory was so fascinating. I thought I would have to write another series, the Suffragette series, which has Kirsty in it as part of a threesome. And it's taken her back to her early days, to the time when this bad sexual experience happened. It's in the book. And she's 18 at the time. And she's breaking away from her family. The rift is happening during the course of an investigation, which 3 suffragettes are investigating. So that's Kirsty.
That's fascinating. I love the whole historical aspect of the work as well. So you're able to really mine an area that is perhaps little known as well, which is interesting. Fantastic. Thank you for that.
The other thing is, I don't write my historical novels in a historical fashion. You know, I don't use modern language, but I don't use historical language either. I write them the same way as I write my contemporary thrillers. So, you know, they don't have this kind of dry feel that some historical novels have, because I'm written in a kind of a modern way without using the modern language.
Yes, thank you. Wendy, you seem to be back online again now.
I'm back on my
person?
I think I'm on 4G.
Okay, good. Okay, so I don't know if you heard that question or not.
Sorry.
Oh, no worries. So we were talking about, this was one of the questions I just threw in to create a bit of danger. So this was basically me asking you about your series of books. And I know you've done several different series, but it was to choose one of your main characters and explain to the readers and the viewers here, has that character evolved or matured in some way across the books? And if so, in what ways have they changed?
Well, I'll go with Detective Inspector Shona Mackenzie because there's the most books out in that, so she's had the most opportunity to develop. But Detective Inspector Shona Mackenzie, when in the first book, she's literally just come back to Dundee. She was born in Dundee, but was brought up in Oxford because her father moved there to be a university lecturer. He took up a post as a professor down there, and she moved. So she moved as a child, and she's just come back to Dundee with her husband, who wanted to move back to Dundee, so she did, but he promptly left her and moved in with another woman. So she's not very keen on men at that point, but things do improve because she has a bit of a thing with an on-off relationship with the Procurator Fiscal, Douglas Lawson, which their relationship develops throughout the 7 books. And I won't say too much about that without giving the plot away, really, as to how it does it. But he's kind of wanting something to do with her, and she doesn't want anything to do with him because, you know, she's anti-men. But she's also new to the team, and she's trying to put her stamp as a you know, a boss, really. But she's got a team from hell. She's got a sergeant she doesn't understand because he speaks Dundonian, and she keeps having to say to him, what are you talking about? Speak English, you know. But obviously she picks up a bit of Dundonian throughout the series. But she's also got a couple of young rotten stags in her team who both want to be top dog. But I'm mixing metaphors here, sorry. Rotten stags that want to be top dog. But they're always fighting with each other, and I'm talking about fisticuffs here at times. I mean, they're a nightmare. So she's got a team from hell. She's got a team that are all trying to come together to gel. And by the 2nd book, she's got a problem because suddenly they're Police Scotland, not Tayside Police, and it's all change again. And so she does mature. She becomes more used to the team. She becomes more used to handling them. She gets used to the moniker she's got of Scotland's go-to girl for weird and wonderful murders because she's always got a serial killer on her hands. So she's never having a good day, D.I. Shona Mackenzie. She's got the boss from hell as well. So she spends the whole time thinking about how she can kill him and get away with it. And I've actually done a book called D.I. Shona Mackenzie's Guide to Killing Your Boss, which you can get free if you sign up to my mailing list. Because everybody wanted it. All the readers were saying, write that book, write that book. So she does grow and develop because she has to. If she doesn't, and she's the same person as she was in the 1st book, well, firstly, it's not going to be true to life. Secondly, everybody's going to get bored, not least me. And if I'm bored, the reader's going to be bored. Because I need to enjoy it for the readers to enjoy it, because it will come across in the writing. The others haven't had time to develop, but I will just say quite quickly about Cass Claymore. Cass Claymore is a red-headed motorbike riding ex-ballerina who inherits a private detective agency and accidentally hires an ex-con dwarf and an octogenarian. It's laugh out loud capers. She has no clue what she's doing. And that is the biggest part of the book, the fact she has no clue what she's doing. And the ex-con dwarf, Quill, knows more about it all than she does because he's been in the underworld. So that is the premise of the book. So the likelihood of her developing much isn't high. Because if she does, the book will get really boring.
That the Antiques and Alibis novel?
Antiques and Alibis, yes.
Yeah. That sounds fantastic. That's a fantastic character. I mean, just the blurb alone is hilarious, you know, and it's so out there as
She's
well.
also got this daft dog called Yakul, and Yakul is spelled E-A-G-A-L. It's Gaelic for terror, and the dog loves that word. It uses it every given moment. It obviously speaks Gaelic because it's a nightmare. The dog is a nightmare. It's a liability. Unfortunately, it was written into her uncle's will that who she inherited the detective agency from, that she has to keep this daft dog, or if she doesn't, then she loses the detective agency, and it's her only means of income because she knackered her knee and couldn't carry on with her. She was a prima ballerina with the Royal Ballet, and you can't do that if you've knackered your knee. So she has to keep this dog to keep the detective agency and actually feed herself. So she's lumbered with it. Trying to shoot it. She's got nothing else to do.
So the dog's become like her partner in crime.
Basically, she's stuck with this dog. And I mean, it's all a bunch of capers. Her big sister, because she's the youngest of like 12 kids or something, and she her big sister keeps dumping all her kids on her because her big sister's a vicar and she has to go and see She has to go and see parishioners up in the hospital and things. And the kids are a liability because they're always, one of them's always off school because she's got a large family as well. So she dumps somewhere. So she's got an ex-con divorce, the dog from hell, and kids to look after, and a detective agency to look after. And, you know, so she's not going to mature at all in the slightest.
She sounds very busy. It's a miracle she actually gets any work done.
She manages it. I don't know how she manages it because she's absolutely useless, but she does. Somehow or other, she gets a man or woman.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, we're all, believe it or not, that's 30 minutes up already. So what I'll do is I'll choose another question that Lindsay had given us, which was, how do you do your research? And I know I've spoke to one particular author about research, who's with us today, and I know she's got some hair-raising stories to tell. But what about Chris and Wendy? We'll start with Wendy, if that's okay in this particular instance, just while you've got your internet, as well at the moment.
Yes,
so just in case it suddenly goes again.
Just while Sky's finding me interesting, I'll stick here. Yeah, well, a lot of what I do comes out of my head, that's for sure, because quite frankly, it's a bit difficult to research serial killers. But, and to be honest, the inside of my head's a worrying place to be because I can kill people in many different ways. And that brings me round to research. I'm surprised I'm not on a government, I probably am, on a government watch list somewhere. And if the door goes, it's probably the police trying to arrest me because they think I'm about to blow somebody up or something. Because like all crime writers, we do all sorts of research on the internet. But it's not just the internet, because although Google is our friend, there's so much more to it than that. So I do research in libraries. I speak to the police in real life. I speak to anybody I can, forensic people in real life. And you ask them questions. They're all delighted to answer. I mean, I phoned up a taxidermist in Edinburgh, which apparently is the nearest one you can find in Dundee. And I said, do you mind if I ask you a few questions? And he said, no, not at all. And I asked him all about taxidermy because I quite fancied, stuffing a body in a book. I should do. Yeah. And the best person to ask about that is a taxidermist. So you do that. I needed to know about motorbikes because Cass Claymore rides a motorbike. So I was on a train and I thought, I'll ring up on a train, no less, ScotRail. I rang up a motorbike shop in Aberdeen, which was the nearest one I could find to Dundee. Apparently we don't have anything in Dundee. We're a non-existent city. So I phoned one in Aberdeen and I said, look, what would be the best bike for a female about this height who's quite slight because she used to be a ballerina? What would be the best bike? And they said, what's that about? So I explained the series and everybody round about must have think we've got a right nutter here, you know what I mean? Everybody on the train. And they told me what bike to use. So just ask experts because they know what they're talking about. I got a Google link to Scottish law because, of course, in Scotland, the law is completely different to anywhere else in the world, including England. Can I just say something about one other series I'm writing, if you don't mind, very quickly, because it's not crime, and I'll tell you about the research for that. I have been asked to write a narrative non-fiction book. It's going to be fiction, but based completely on fact, about the life of a gentleman called Thomas Graham. And Thomas Graham was in the 1850s, he was a doctor. He went to Surgeons' Hall just after the Burke and Hare debacle. And he then joined the Royal Navy as a doctor. And I was a nurse in the Royal Navy. And I'm very, very fortunate in that somebody has already done all the research for this, because there's a gentleman in Australia who has done all the research of this gentleman's life. And it's him that wants me to write the book. And I've got a tentative publisher interested in it at the moment. There is a publisher interested in it. And he has literally sent me the first batch of all the research from Australia. And most of the originals are now in like the Wellcome Museum, the British Museum, the British Library, places like that. But I've got photocopies of it all. And it's a huge box and it came all the way from Australia. There's going to be more. He's given me it all on a pen drive as well. So he put it all in, because, can I just say that this is, and Chris will back me up here, when it comes to historical research, I've literally got all the research, all the letters that he wrote home to his family while he was alive, all the letters.
Wow.
But when he was writing in the 1850s, paper was in short supply. So nobody just wrote a letter. They wrote a letter, then they turned it round and they wrote the other way. So it was like a crossword.
Oh.
So the pen drive has it all translated. But I've got but can I just give you one example of what research can take you? One of the letters is a letter home where he sent to his sister, basically, can you do my laundry if I send it to you? He's in Edinburgh and he's in the West Coast near the border somewhere. And so it just goes to prove that students have never changed through the years, because they were asking for their laundry then and they're still doing it now. So, you know, and he was miles from his sister and he still wanted his laundry done by his sister. So I will stop there on research.
Oh, that's brilliant. So when you were explaining about the letter, so basically two letters, one overlaid across the other. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, because what you'd do is you would turn it at a 90-degree angle, and then right between the letters you already had there.
Okay.
Yeah, so you would literally, so you would, if it was one of our books, we'd write the way the book was upside down. Then we'd turn it on our side horizontally and write again.
Yeah, wow.
And it's so difficult to translate. It really is difficult to read, because obviously they knew how to read it because their brain was used to that. Our brain's used to 12-point Times New Roman, whatever it is we read. Helvetica, or we're used to something else. We're not used to, and of course it was cursive handwriting. They used different words because it was the 1850s, not the 2020s. We're nearly 200 years later, 170 years later, we use different words. But it's fascinating to have all these letters. And he was a poet as well. I've got all his poems. I've got everything that has anything to do with this man. I have it, including his birth certificate. There you go. Now, what writer can say that they're handed all their writing on a plate, all their research on a plate, or in a box?
Brilliant. And so it's really interesting, again, because we were touching on, historical work with Chris actually a moment ago. So it's amazing to have all that information at your fingertips as well, And then I suspect this will be quite a different response. I'm going to go to Jackie next about your research, because I know you've had literally quite hair-raising experiences with your research for your novels.
Yeah, I quite like to be a bit hands-on with my research and try things out and see how they work in reality. Actually, how I first got to know Wendy and Chris initially was we went a trip to an armoury. So we spent the day swinging axes and swords at each other. And I actually made a follow-up visit after that to the armoury because I thought that the book that I was writing at the time, Shadows, there was a gun scene in that, and I thought, it would make sense for me to go back up there and speak to the guy in much more detail about how guns work and how this might work in practice in the scene. So he spent a lot of time showing me, it was the AK-47 assault rifle. Told me all about how things can go wrong with it and why they go wrong with it. Got me to take one apart, put it back together again. And it taught me an awful lot. So it helped me with the storyline to make it more believable and gave me lots of ideas. But he also let me fire a couple of real guns, handguns, on the day as well. And I found it quite terrifying. And the serious aspect of that is that it really showed me just how powerful guns are and just the amount of damage and carnage one single bullet can cause. And it made me really just think twice about the whole thing about guns. I've never been a fan of guns anyway, and I live in a country where there's proper gun control, and I'm glad of that. But even more so now, having seen firsthand just how powerful a gun can be, I would never ever want to live somewhere where there weren't proper gun controls in place. But the less serious aspect of it was he allowed me to keep the spent bullet casings just as souvenirs, and I popped them into my pocket, my jacket pocket, went home and forgot all about them. never thought any more about where they were, until one day I worked with as part of social work for my job at the time, and I was visiting the prison as part of my job, and walked through the security gates, and the place went into lockdown straight away, and it was because I had bullets in my pocket. I didn't realise I locked down the prison. Yeah, so that was one of the things. So just that hands-on experience, I like to just go and try things and do things. And like with Toxic as well, I had an idea about it would be great if I was doing a presentation, and there was some smoke kind of could rise behind where I was speaking. And I was also with Shadows as well at that point. I had a scene where there was a smoke grenade going off, and I had some questions about that, and I couldn't actually find what I needed to find out about it online without going into really dodgy websites, very extremist, militarised websites. So I thought I'll just order some and try them out in my kitchen. So I set off the smoke bomb in my kitchen, and the whole house just became engulfed with smoke straight away. So I opened the front and the back doors really quickly, and the plume of smoke pushed out into the back garden. And we live next to the police helipad. So the next thing, the police helicopter's coming around, checking out what this massive plume of smoke is in the back garden. Yeah, I was just out, just giving them away. Everything's fine. I'm just. But yeah, Wendy's right as well. People are very good at getting back to you, and usually very happy to answer all sorts of silly questions. So for the third book run, all I had in mind at the start of that was that I wanted it to begin with a body being found at Arbroath Football Club. I like to have the club in my stories. So I had this murder scene in mind where the body's found at the club. And then I thought I actually better check with the club that they're okay with that, because policies just aren't too keen to be associated with murder. So I contacted the club and explained it all, and they were delighted. They said, yeah, that'd be great, have your opening murder here. And they said, by the way, could you make it the referee? So that gets murdered. So the referee, Julie, gets murdered in the storyline. And then I thought, actually, my character who got murdered initially was quite a bad character, quite a police record and everything. And I don't know, would he be allowed to be a referee in real life? So I contacted the SFA and again went through the spiel explaining why I was contacting them. And I said, that this bad character, would he be allowed to be a referee? And they said, oh, yeah. So
it's
good
great imagery. It's great imagery. I can just imagine you nonchalantly at the kitchen with smoke everywhere, police everywhere. I'm just writing a novel.
Yeah, honestly. But it's true about the web searches too that Wendy says, because you do have to research sometimes pretty horrible stuff. And for the book that I'm writing at the minute, there's a lot of like far right extremist stuff that I'm including in the storyline, and I'm having to go on some of these far right websites, and they're vile. They're just horrible, and I don't like having them on my internet searches, and it's deeply uncomfortable. So that there is an element of that when you're writing crime, is that you're having to look into stuff that does, it turns your stomach. But if you feel strongly enough that you want to expose some of this and how some of this can be dealt with, you have to research and try and understand a bit about what's going on. So yeah, there's all sorts of aspects to research, hands-on and online.
So the overall opinion seems to be that it's a lot of fun, but it can take you to some quite dark, unsettling places as well. So what about you, Chris? What about your research stories or research horror stories?
Well, my contemporary ones, I don't need to do a great deal of research for them, although I've done forensic courses, and I've actually got a qualification in criminology because I worked with the police when I was in social work. I mean, child protection, you're working hand in hand with them, so you kind of get to grips with the procedures, although it's probably a lot different now with Police Scotland. But I mean, the actual basic, what would you say, the background office stuff, I don't think will change that too much. But for the historical ones, I mean, a lot of my historical stuff came from my article writing years. because most of my articles were local history articles. I did articles on the fisher folk, I did them on whaling, I did them on women police, which was where my interest in women's police came from. So a lot of that. But the other thing, of course, is I usually like to go and walk my areas that I'm writing about. So I'll go to Dundee and I'll walk the streets. I remember reading one book years ago where the character walked from Broughty Ferry to Lochee in 20 minutes. And I thought, that doesn't sound right. So I always go out and walk my routes and walk the places. When I did my Devil's Porridge, my Gretna one, I went down to Gretna for a week and visited the Devil's Porridge Museum there. I also found a thesis online, Timbertown Girls, which was fantastic. And I think it's now a book, but it wasn't a book at that time, but I was able to download it and use it. So a lot of stuff like that, you're looking into. But the other thing is the little things, like how do you drive a vintage car? What do you do? How does it work? How do you turn it on? What are the gears like? Well, I spent 3 days looking at YouTube videos on vintage cars, driving them. I could have driven a vintage car by the time I'd finished. And that worked out in 2 paragraphs in the book. So 3 days for 2 paragraphs. The book I'm writing at the moment, I have a lap dancer in it. That's interesting. So I'm on YouTube watching all the lap dancers. And again, that my lap dancing routine works into about 1 paragraph or 2 paragraphs in the book that I'll be writing. So you've got all this kind of thing, so it's quite fascinating. I mean, you really look up some fascinating stuff. I actually did a book once, an unpublished one, like Jackie. I've got umpteen unpublished ones in the drawer, and it was I had to look at massage parlours. Well, I got places like Lethem Grange, which was open at the time, which was very plush, proper massage parlour. But I also got the dungeons and all those kind of things. Oh boy, that was an experience. Plus the fact that if you are working in that area of work, you can actually get over £1,000 for it if you stay all night. So I mean, we're in the wrong game, ladies.
When the bailiffs are knocking at the door.
Eh?
We'll bear that in mind when the bailiffs are knocking at the door.
Yeah. I mean, it was eye-opening.
I can imagine, yeah. It's extraordinary where the research, can take you. And it's you set out writing, perhaps a crime novel, not thinking that you're going to be exploding bombs in the back of your kitchen, or you're going to be looking up lap dancing and all these things, that you probably didn't think about when you started writing it, because it's not really what you have in mind. So we've got just over 10 minutes. I think we've got time for one more question. I do want to give you time just to tell the readers how they can, subscribe to your respective newsletters, etc. So we will get to that in a moment. But I think in the meantime, we've got time for just one more question. And what I was going to ask you, given that we've just we are hopefully coming to the end of the current lockdown situation, but I know that a lot of new authors will be emerging because there's that's something that's came out of the lockdown, is that a lot of people have decided, well, now is the time to write that novel I've always wanted to write. So given that you're all very experienced now, you're all established authors, so I wondered if you would be able to impart any practical advice for those who are seeking to launch themselves into the publishing world for the first time. So we'll start with Jackie.
I would say if you're writing to be published, if your intention is to get your work published, I think you have to be realistic between balancing your freedom and your creativity to write what you want to write from the heart, and writing something that's going to sell, that's going to fit the market and sell. So like I said about when I had drafted Toxic originally, it wasn't necessarily a crime fiction book, but when I researched researched publishing and how publishing works, I realised very quickly that you have to have, your book has to fit a specific market, a specific category, a genre. So I would say have a look online, have a look at how publishers are describing their new releases. So in particular crime fiction, there's lots of kind of subgenres in there as well. So are they describing their new book as a psychological thriller, a domestic thriller, a domestic noir? Are they describing it as a police procedural, as historic crime fiction, as a cosy crime. So I really get to grips with what the categories are and think carefully about where your work fits with that, because if it doesn't fit with that, it's going to be much more challenging for you to find a route into publication, unless you want to go down the self-published route, which I don't have experience of. So I don't know how self-publishing works really. Too much work for me, I think. But if you're looking to get someone else to publish it for you, I think you have to be very clear about where that sits. And also, the other thing that's different to when I first started writing or first got published is the role of social media and being present in social media. I think you have to have an active presence and be seen to have an active presence in social media for a publisher or an agent to be interested, because they have to be confident that you're going to be out there and being active and proactive in promoting your work. And the crime fiction community itself is very, very open, accessible, friendly. If you're writing crime fiction, get involved online with the crime fiction community. You will make friends, people will have your back. They'll support you, they'll help you. So get involved as much as possible. Good. And that you find that really to help.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, I completely wholeheartedly agree with the camaraderie of crime fiction writing. It's a very, very supportive network if that happens to be the genre that any of our potential readers are looking to go into. So I know you touched on self-publishing, and I know that Chris and Wendy, you've both had experience there. So Chris, would you like to go next, please?
Yes, I've been both traditionally published and self-published, and quite honestly, I much prefer the self-publishing because you've got control. If you go for traditional publishing, which most people want to do, your first book puts you in a box. If I'd still been with traditional publishing, my historical series would not exist. I would still be writing contemporary thrillers all the time. Being self-published gives me that freedom. I can write contemporary, I can write historical. I'm not in that box. But the other thing is, I think is important to know that if you are breaking into publishing, you need a lot of determination. You need to develop a thick skin as well, because you'll get a lot of rejections along the way. So it's the determination that keeps you going, perseverance, not giving up. If you give up at the first few rejections, you'll never get there. So keep at it. Oh, what's that? Where was I? I've lost my place now.
You were talking about rejections. If you get a few, don't let that.
Yeah, you do need to develop that thick skin. If you do decide, I mean, most people do want to be traditionally published, and I would say that, okay, once you've written your book, look for a publisher, look for an agent, but put a time limit on it. If that publisher and agent does not bite and take you on within, say, maybe a year, 2 years, whatever time limit you put on it, then seriously think about self-publishing. I mean, it really is worth doing.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Chris. And Wendy, what's your take on this?
Well, I would agree with everything that I would say my learned colleagues have said, that Chris and Jackie have said. Yes, you're right. But on top of that, it's also following your dream. If you have a dream to write a book, you've got to write the book in the first place. So write the book and polish it and edit it till it's the best it can be, and then edit it again before you even start to pitch. And don't let fear get in your way, because that is what stops most people writing or publishing a book. It's fear. Don't let fear get in the way. You have to pitch it to somebody. The difficulty is that people see the book as a baby and they go, oh, I just wouldn't hand my baby over to somebody. We've put a lot of work into this, but with all due respect, it's not a baby, it's a book. Yeah. And you need to give it to someone else to be seen if you want to be published. If you just want to write it for yourself, that's a totally different kettle of fish altogether. So you either need to hand it over to someone or you need to self-publish. So whether you traditionally publish or whether you go down the self-publishing route, don't let fear stand in your way. Now, a lot of people will say, and this is a word of advice really, is that they'll say, I want to go down the traditional route because I can't be bothered marketing. That is a myth. That if you go down the traditional route, your publishers will do all the marketing for you. Unless your name has billions of dollars at the end of it, nobody's going to market you. It's down to you, because nobody, in fact, you're the best person to market your book because you know it best. You know your book. Yeah. And yes, traditional publishers, some of them will market, but they're not going to do as much marketing as you need. So you need to have a marketing head. So think of how you're going to market the book and start marketing it when you write the first word. And I've written a marketing book, and it came out last week. So that's why I'm saying this. You need to start marketing early as possible so that people know about it. Build up a buzz, whether you're going to be traditionally published or whether you're self-published. Because if you want to traditionally publish now, they're going to ask, to back up what Jackie says, what's your social media following? What's your marketing plan? And a lot of them will ask for a marketing plan when you first pitch them. And even agents are doing that now, because they want to know whether you are a sort of person who can get that book out there and get known. So it's face your fears and give it out there anyway. Face your fears and traditionally publish or traditionally publish. And remember that marketing is key. You're running a business. People just want to sit in a garret and write. Well, unfortunately, one, garrets don't exist anymore. And two, even if they did, you can't just sit in a garret and write anymore. People expect you to do something with it.
Those are excellent points, and I think that I completely agree with that. I think it's expected of authors now, regardless of whether they're self-published or traditional, but certainly more so in traditional now. That seems to have moved. You're expected to wear a lot of different hats now as an author. You're expected to be able to do the marketing and to have a social media following and to be comfortable doing that as well. Excellent. Okay, thank you. Now we've just got about 4 minutes, which I think is perfect timing. So what we've got is, I think I'm just going to give you each an opportunity to let our viewers and readers know how they can contact you, how they can subscribe to your respective newsletters, where they can find your books, for example, as well. So we'll start with Chris, if that's okay.
Well, I've got a website, chrislongmuir.co.uk, so you can subscribe to my email list there, although I warn you, I am not very productive on my email list. I don't put many letters out. There's a contact page there as well that you can contact me on. My books are all on Amazon, they're in Waterstones, they're in all the good bookshops. I'm actually running a promotion this month because it's my birthday this month. I'm a Leo, and I've decided that as a nice present from me to my readers, I've reduced all my Kindle ebooks down to $1.99. Now they're normally $3.99, and that bargain will vanish at midnight on the 31st of August, like Cinderella. So you've got to be there before the end of August if you want a Kindle bargain. And the other thing is, one thing you were mentioning, self-publishing. This book's not on back at normal price. I have written The Nuts and Bolts of Self-Publishing, which is a step-by-step guide to self-publishing if you want to do it. I mean, I hadn't meant to promote that, but because you brought in self-publishing, I thought it might be worth mentioning.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Jackie, next, please.
I've got a website too. It's jackiemcleanauthor.com. I try to keep it up to date. I do a monthly newsletter, which is a roundup of new releases that are coming out in crime fiction and events and things, to try and kind of keep us involved in more widely in crime fiction. I'm also writing a non-fiction book, which is around the history of literature, illustrated by stamps, because I collect stamps too. So I just post some updates on how I'm getting on with that as well. So try and keep it up to date and do some book reviews on there too. So that's the best place, jackiemcleanauthor.com, and I'm always lurking about Twitter. It's JackieJamX27, I think, or Jackie Jam. I actually can't remember the handle, sorry.
No problem. That's great. Thank you very much, Jackie. And finally, Wendy.
Well, you can find me, funnily enough, at wendyhjones.com. Don't forget the H in the middle, especially if you email me. soul, it's wendy@wendyjones.com. Now forwards my emails to me. So it's wendy@wendyhjones.com. But I'm wendyhjones.com for my website. They'll get a little pop-up, and so you need to enable pop-ups very briefly, and you will get a free Detective Inspector Shona Mackenzie mystery, DI Shona Mackenzie's Guide to Killing Your Boss. If you click on Writing and Marketing, I have another newsletter which is for writers on writing and marketing, and for that you will get a free writing and marketing blueprint, and again you will get emails from both of them every 2 weeks. You can sign up for either or both, and you will get emails every 2 weeks around what I'm doing. And the writing and marketing one gives writing and marketing advice. And I'm Wendy H Jones on every single social media platform you can ever think of, including TikTok randomly. TikTok, and I'm not understanding it, but I think I'm probably about 40 years over the age range for TikTok, but I'm there. And if anybody knows anything about TikTok, let me know.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. And I think that's perfect timing. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank Chris Longmuir, Jackie McLean, Wendy Jones, and Lindsay Adams as well. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ian.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you, guys. Just got a quick question from somebody for Jackie. It's Kevin Ferguson has asked, please ask Jackie how much she enjoyed lying dead on the floor of Waterston Stirling. I don't understand that. I can only think of Bloody Scotland, but or were you like the chalk outline for the you know how Bloody Scotland always had that like chalk outline of the body? Was that you? Did you like that?
Yeah, there was a bunch of us. We got a group of us, Wendy and Chris and myself and another 3 writers, got together to form what we called Murder and Mayhem, and we did a wee tour of some of the Waterstones and libraries, and did a bit of a carry on Q&A session. But we always had somebody who got killed during the course of the discussion, and so we had the dead body on the floor.
We always have a dead body. Can I just say, the first time we ever did it, it was in a library in Arbroath, and we forgot to let the poor librarian up again, so she lay on the floor for an hour. We forgot to say you can get up now with a minute you can knock down. So the
number of times just before we were due to turn up at the bookshop, we would be phoning each other and saying, "Have we got a body? Have we got a body?"
And then we got a volunteer, my friend's son, who's very tall, but he was only 13. He came around and he was my professional dead body. He's going to put it on his TV.
Oh, well, yeah, you always knew you were going to get a laugh with you 3. Thank you very much, ladies, and Ian as well for doing this. Much appreciated. It's been so interesting to hear you speaking. It's always interesting to hear you speaking. You always don't exactly know what you're going to get when you get Wendy, Chris, and Jackie together. Thank you again to Jackie for posting the blog on putting on the newsletter. All my friends were like, "You're on the front of my newsletter. Well done, Lindsay." And I'm like, "Yeah." I'm just like, "Ooh." Thank you to Wendy for doing all the events at the college that she's done for me the last two years. She did came in and sat in the college and she did events, and then she also helped me with when we did our children's events. Well, she took me around going, "This is a children's author, this is a children's author," and I'm like, "Thank you so much." I mean, it went really well, and everybody was so pleased. They were like, "How did you get so many authors?" And I was like, "I went to Wendy's thing, and she just introduced me to everybody." And then some of them, like Pamela St Abbas, who's Pammy Bale, she actually came to my rainbows, and Wendy came to my rainbows as well at Newborough. They also got absolute ball. They did the finger painting with her, and they just absolutely loved it. But thank you so much. Thank you so much to Ian and Chris as well. I still remember that day that we went to Wendy's thing at Glam's Castle, and it was Jackie driving and her partner Alison and Ian and Kelly Lacey from Love Books Group in that car, literally driving around roundabouts 3 or 4 times. That was just hilarious. I mean, and it was a freezing cold in that castle as well. That before the East from the East. It's these memories you have, as you say, of everybody comes together, bloggers and authors and editors you know, everybody's coming together and just having a ball. That's what this is all about, basically. Trying to make up for us all missing in, well, bloody Scotland and everything.
Thank you.
But thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
And sorry, the next event is at 3:00, and it's talking Murder in the Kingdom of Fife with myself, Tana Collins, and Marion Todd.
Thank
so
you.
Enjoy.